welcome to the Kamala Show, where we bring you interviews and conversations with technologists, entrepreneurs, filmmakers, and other newsmakers from in and around the Bay Area. My guest today is Amit Pande. He's a Sloan Fellow at Stanford's Graduate Business School. Welcome to the show, Amit.
Thanks, Kamala. Good to be here.
So you also run the design labs or design at labs?
It's Design at GSB, which is a forum to bring more design thinking and get designers from the Valley to come to Stanford campus and interact with students.
Okay, so we are talking about design today and,
Sure.
and technology and innovation. And you, before you came to Stanford, you spent, 10, 12 years working in the corporate world?
I did. So I spent about 10 years working across Yahoo, Oracle, and Hewlett-Packard. I also did my own startup. I spent 9 years in Bangalore, which is the Valley equivalent in that part of the world.
In India.
And mostly built design and engineering teams directed towards driving more innovation within different kinds of areas that each of these corporations were working on.
Okay. What prompted you to give all that up and become a grad student again?
It's a good question. I really traded off what was a fairly comfortable lifestyle at the time to come back to a lot of hard work here. And I think if you look at Stanford Business School's motto, that's probably a good way to answer this question. So our motto is change organizations, change lives, change the world, right? And before you do any of that, you have to first change yourself.
So you changed your world.
I felt like I needed to change my perspective. And the best way to change perspective is to immerse yourself into something which is going to be very fast-paced with a great bunch of people in a great atmosphere. And Stanford Business School was a combination of all of these.
And what kinds of classmates do you have? Because these are not your regular students. These are people who have spent time in corporate world or doing whatever they did. So they bring their life experiences.
They do. And the class is incredibly diverse. So I'll give you 2 or 3 quick examples. On the one end of the spectrum, we have someone who's in their early 50s, is a former Stanford School of Medicine professor and runs her own private wine label in San Francisco. On the other end of the spectrum, we have someone who's probably 30 and a guy who had a PhD before coming in and was the youngest ever partner at Ernst & Young in their Moscow office. And then somewhere in between, you have people all the way from large corporations, serial entrepreneurs, and people who've worked for governments ranging all the way from South America all the way to Hong Kong. So it's about 83 fellows across 20, 30 different countries, many of them with families here. So it's a full-time immersive experience for the cohort where we go through the same thing that the MBAs go through, but we just go through it within a year.
It's a year-long program, so very intense.
Very intense.
Okay. So what does it mean to be a designer today? Because that is your focus, and you're also doing this thing, design labs at Stanford. What does it mean to be a designer today? We hear about UI, UX experience. You know, anytime you talk to a startup guy, he's like, yeah, the UI experience is not good in this app. So what does it mean?
It definitely means more than it used to. I think the quick historical perspective on this is that, you know, it's only in the 90s that we started using computers more for people than for governments or for other institutions. And so design became more important because at the end of the day, it's people like you or me who are using a product. We open it for the first time, we expect it to just work. Design today just means that something should work as you expect it to, but then it should go above and beyond that to perhaps surprise you, to delight you, to make you happy. And so the role of the designer has changed from someone who just makes it work to someone that gives it that extra special.
The experience.
The experience that makes it more delightful and memorable. And ultimately from a business perspective, which is part of where I'm now focusing on not only what I did earlier, but also picking up a new set of things here at the Stanford Business School. Ultimately, if it has to work as a business, it has to keep people coming back. So what design has now become is this differentiator which makes you stand out from all of the other products that are out there. The great thing about the Valley, of course, is as you would imagine, we are setting a lot of the design almost role models that the rest of the world follows. So between Facebook, Twitter, Google, and all of the other companies
What about
out
Apple?
here. I mean, Apple's an interesting design company as well, but certainly it's a bit rare because it always had this spiritual duo of Steve Jobs and Jonathan Ive who decided what was to be designed. Most companies don't tend to be as top-down. They tend to be much more distributed. So in Google, there's no one master designer. There are actually various teams of distributed designers, and I think that's probably going to be the trend going ahead. What happens with Apple, we don't know, but certainly as long as Jonathan Ive is still there, they will continue to be the role model for anything in hardware.
So if you had a startup and it became a pretty big startup, how would you incorporate design to foster innovation, productivity, and creativity? Because that is what you're very interested in, how companies and enterprises can foster innovation and creativity using design.
It's a really good question. I think the easy answer to that these days is to just hire a chief experience officer.
Oh, there is something called chief experience officer?
There is.
Okay, like chief happiness officer, there's a...
It's lasted a little longer than that other title. But I think the problem is that you can't just have a set of people in the boardroom who believe in design and have a company that is great in design. You need to have it all the way down to grassroots. A few things I would do.
That sounds suspiciously like Apple because top down.
Well, I think they're a rare case of a closed ecosystem that actually works. But for the most part, I think you have to learn from all of the people that are around you. So the first thing I would do is to hire for a good sense of design. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer or if you're a marketer today in a company, you have to care about design. So you should build that in right at the entrance. And then what I would do is I would create a very visual culture, right? So if you see, if you look at design, the way we know good design is that we see it. Once we see it, we know what good design is. So if you surround people by objects of great beauty and objects that are very well designed, IDEO does a great job of this, certainly, where they have their own designs all around them.
But it's a design company.
It's a design company, or Pixar does a great job of it as well. They have their own productions, their own creations around them. So I would try and do some of those things, because at the end of the day, it's a person who designs. I mean, every object around you, including the shell in your phone, was designed by somebody. So if you like it, it was designed by somebody who thought about it. If you don't like it, it was probably designed by somebody who didn't think about it.
And it fits snugly.
It does.
And it slips out easily too.
It does, and in 10 years from now, maybe your phone will be bendable, so someone will have to design for that.
So that's what you would have. You would have a chief experience officer, you would have visually like a wall or something?
I would have it across the workplace. I think we feel pride when we see our own creations and our own team.
So you wouldn't have these gray cubicles that we have come to associate enterprises, especially in the Valley. There are some companies that don't have cubicles, but by and large, it's a cubicle culture.
That would be another thing I would probably do, is to design the workplace to be much more fluid, because at the end of the day, you have to make work fit a person rather than make a person fit work. For the longest time, we've had people fitting into fixed workplaces, but to get great design, you need to get people in that mood and that space where they can be creative. And for that, if you have to let them design their own workplace, you should let them do that.
Okay. So you mentioned some of the guys or companies that have come in and focus a lot on design. You mentioned Facebook, you mentioned Google. What about Nest?
I think Nest is actually a great role model for a lot of what's going to happen in organizations in the future, as much as for
folks
homes.
who don't know what is Nest, Nest is a thermostat?
It's a thermostat. It has, and certainly the new smoke alarm as well. It communicates with you.
Google acquired it, right?
Google acquired it. It communicates with you. So one of the things that Nest does really well is that in the smoke alarm product, it has a little light around it which goes off at night, and so if you're sleeping, you have this little dim light, and
yet another light
in your house. But if you think about it, it's about creating an emotional engagement with a product, and that's what Nest has done really well. Because for the most part, when was the last time you actually noticed your thermostat?
I notice it every day, but I don't know how to operate it.
Exactly. So A, you can operate Nest. B, it's a very beautiful looking product. And C, at some level, I think it's developed an emotional engagement. And I think it's an interesting role model, because more and more companies will be forced to think about these kinds of things in what they design.
Okay. So fast forward 10 years from now, how do you think the corporate world is going to look? Let's start with the Valley. Will there be an Oculus Rift? Will we have virtual reality? What will we have? What would be the tools that will be there at a worker's disposal to make them more productive and happy? That is something that you emphasize.
I think the first thing is that anything that can be automated will be automated. We will hopefully see that in 10 years from now. Your workplace and the way you work in the workplace may change from you just driving to work, burning up a lot of carbon, and actually sitting in one place. You may actually be able to sit at home for part of the while. You may be at work part of the while, or you may really be in a remote location part of the while, but you may be connected to the shared space where the 5 people that matter most to you and that you collaborate with are sitting in the same space, literally just like this.
But in a virtual...
But potentially in a virtual world, and you have all the things you need at your disposal, and you can craft those things, you can solve those things, and then you can go dismantle and carry on with the rest of your life. So I think in 10 years, work and non-work will be more blurred. We should be able to work as
so there'll be no
fit.
Work-life balance. That notion may...
I hope there's more blending then.
Blending.
Blending.
Yeah.
And the second thing that I definitely see happening is that I think we will demand more from our work. As
what
people,
do you mean we'll demand more from our work?
As people who are knowledge workers, we have more choices today. So if you're a journalist in 10 years from now coming out of school, or I'm a designer coming out of school in 10 years from now, we will probably look at workplaces and say, okay, am I going to get meaning out of this workplace? I think that's a question we ask less today because there's so much unemployment that you should be just happy to get a job. But in 10 years from now, I think workers will be even more empowered than they are today.
Okay. My last question, we always ask, what is a good company? What's a company that has designed a good product? What's a company that intended to design a good product but ended up with a bad product?
This is a good question. I mean, I think there's various examples around us, but Google Wave is an example that comes to mind to me. They were really thinking of the last question you asked, which is they wanted to get people to be online at the same time and collaborate with each other quickly on projects and then go away and do their other work. But the way they implemented it, I think it was just too complex for the average person to understand. Great intention about building a collaborative product, but just not implemented. To their credit, they killed it, learned from it, and hopefully they'll come back again with it in the future, with or without Nest.
Okay. I know I said last question, but my last question, what is one product that you think is beautifully designed? Pick any product from out there in the world.
One product that's beautifully designed. I mean, I'm still a big fan of my MacBook Pro, and I think it's because there's just something about its cold surface that gives me a lot of pleasure in working with it. I really like the older generation of PCs as well, but just as a handy product, and since I spend half my day on it, I think I'm still a big fan of all the small little touches they've put on the MacBook.
Well, Amit, thank you so much for stopping by and talking about design, innovation, creativity, and blending of business and your life. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching. We'll be back again with another interview. Until then, goodbye.